We have our very own race driver and one of the first female race drivers in Asia, Jedrek.
I was always a person that never really had nerves until an hour before. It's like any sport. You train and you train and you train. And like anything really in your life, it's that 10,000 hour rule. Then, of course, the pressure is always for that moment, but then you just got to really be in that moment and not think about anything.
Like this show? Then rate it 5 stars and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Uncool is a podcast by Creatives at Work. It is produced, written, and hosted by Sean Lee Win Chong and co-hosted by Yen Lyng Lo, co-produced by Raven Lim, and edited by Ray Ng. Uncool. It's cool to be uncool.
Okay, so Yen Lyng, is very fitting that we're recording this like the week before the Singapore Grand Prix. Of course, by the time this episode comes out, the Singapore Grand Prix will be like past for like a month or so. But in any case, it's fitting because we have our very own race driver and of course one of the first female race drivers in Asia, Jedrek. So before we get into it, Claire, which driver vibes with you the most in Formula One?
I mean, it has to be number 44. It's got to be Lewis Hamilton. Husband does not like him, but it's all right. I love Verstappen. I do love like what they bring. I think the characters. For me, it's a character play. Like it's interesting. Yeah. It's bringing back old school racing where there was characters. It's not so formal anymore and business orientated.
So you do a lot of sports presenting. Right? What's that like for you? You know, trying to interview the drivers.
I mean, I've had like events where certain drivers, they've just decided to go completely off topic or not do the interview or not do what has been set out, which is something you can always plan for because they've gone like, I can tell it's getting boring, whatever the event company has like wanted to do. And then they've just kind of gone somewhere else and just completely gone off topic. And that's always quite hard to be impromptu. We've had a little bit of that with back in the days with Mercedes and Lewis. He's known to kind of just sometimes go off topic and you've just got to be prepared with it and go with it. But I've never really had anything too major.
So Claire, you're going to be heading to your probably your busiest weekend of the entire quarter coming up. Maybe you can tell us, what does your typical day look like for you? Because we know that you are, you race, you are a businesswoman, you're a presenter, you host, and of course you got 2 young kids. So what is your typical day like?
Well, I was going to start off to say that God is fair. I can't sing. I'm terrible. Even if I'm in the shower, it's absolutely awful. People would pay me not to sing.
You can make a career out of it as well. It's okay.
I thought about a career in bad singing, in memes. I thought about doing that. Actually, yeah, it was actually an idea. I think people want to listen to that, right? Some bad singing. It'll go viral, maybe.
We can find anything right now on the internet, yeah.
Yeah, typical day. I mean, things are ramping up. I mean, first and foremost, I think it's definitely with family. Constantly finding balance between family. Now that I have 2 kids, and not now. I mean, it's been 5 years really since the start that I had the first kid. And yeah, it's a constant in the morning of being able to get them ready, get them off to school because we drive them to school. Tag teaming with my husband Yui. Making sure what they eat, their schedule, and then I kind of think about my schedule. I'm a freelance presenter, so I'm not attached with the company, so I have to do everything myself. I have to do all the admin myself. We have to do all our business admin ourselves. I think just going through household things, company things. It's weird, the word influencer, KOL, whatever you want to call it nowadays. A lot of social media work. And of course, I do my hosting and presenting. Then I have my passion projects where I like to connect people up. For instance, like reaching out to the youth. I mean, this Formula One weekend is the last 2 weeks coming up. It's not just all about work. I think it's been important to be able to give back to our youth as well and connect them up and connect people up. Yeah.
So tell us more about this journey that you've been on. How did it get to where you are? Because what you do is rather unique. Yes, you are an influencer, you are a KOL, but in a very specific genre, right? I would say specifically in racing, right?
I mean, I think that's my basis that people know about me. But I think, to give some context, I have also kind of learned to step back from something that I've tagged myself against, being that motorsport personality, because essentially work stopped for 2 years. I couldn't travel, which was the basis of my life the last 10 years, going to races, training for races, presenting at live events, being the commentator as well as live TV presenter. That's 10 years of my life. Also managing my husband's team or doing team sport. That was 10 years of my life. I definitely am a person who is a chameleon, who kind of has learned to change with the times. And I think it's really important to reinvent yourself. But I think going back to your question, which was how did I get there and how this journey started? I mean, to be honest, the real basis, I mean, number one was, I think, to summarize everything. One was accidental. Two, I mean, the most important thing is then the strategic part of it. Some part of it has been on purpose. And then learning how to do the business side of that. And learning and having mentors. So there's really two parts to my story. The first part really was I've always done sport. My parents were not sporty people. This is something I think sometimes your personality, absolutely. Now that I have children, I've learned that it's innate. I just had a lot of energy. I also had a lot of support from my parents, even though they were so busy working. I mean, I had a great childhood. I was running around, climbing things, throwing eggs at the neighbors, knocking on doors, running away. I mean, I had a great time. Some of it was confusing a little bit. I mean, because obviously I'm of mixed parentage. So I used to get asked things in the playground. Are you Chinese? What are you? And I never understood. I did not know my parents were of different race until I was about 12 years old when I moved to Singapore. And I think it was a more parent thing when I had kids ask me like, oh, you're mixed, or maybe they were hanging about me because my accent or the way I look, or my hair was different because it's wavy. My surname, I think people were intrigued for good or bad reasons, whatever. You're 12 years old. It was a period of my life where I was pure, I was enthusiastic, I was curious. I had a great time. It was a fantastic first 12 years of my life.
How was it like? Because 12 years old is not an easy age to transition. And that was a huge transition.
It was
right? Yeah.
I did not enjoy it. My parents were away for a while. They sent us here, went back and packed up. It was very confusing. I was also having to be an older sister to a younger sister who was crying a lot. I was stuck into like my aunt's house and with people who I knew, but then it's not my parents.
Unfamiliar, just.
Yeah, I had to be strong for a better most of a year without my parents. There was some probably childhood trauma of things that I've worked through. I mean, I was also thrown into, I would say, like I was very always enthusiastic about my studies back in UK. I was thrown into a place where they've told, you're not so great over here. You got to do all this tuition, and you've got, it was very different.
What school do you go to?
I joined when I came to Singapore, I was in Cedar Girls School, but I also had a bit of say because I wanted to do it because I loved running. Yeah, so I was in the team sports there. I remember so much of random details and things. It's because it kind of set the foundation, really. I did things like the X Games and aggressive inline. You can see me in photos from the age of 6 running and doing competitions, running my heart out. I think it's just something that I've always just been more akin to for things like, so we had the local X Games, and I went into, there's a part of me, the breakdancing, which people know more on the
breakdancing. I've never seen you breakdance.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm actually, my dad on my recent birthday actually did a memory box, and he has all these photos of me, which probably is a good reason why I have all these neck injuries of all these things that I was doing, all these, freezes. And that was a big part of my life because I was very into the hip hop scene back in my teenage years. I studied hospitality and tourism for my degree.
And you didn't go through the international school, which is the most common for those who came?
No, I didn't, because I was living with my family over here. So I think with the local, like they knew how to get into the system here and stuff like that. So it was a huge adjustment for me. It was massive. And of course, I don't speak Mandarin. It was a difficult time. The system was very, very different.
No, it's okay, Claire. Yen Lyng and I don't really speak Mandarin either.
I'm trying to. I know my colors. I know what mooncake is. Yebing.
Yeah.
But I was always working, doing commercials and flying out and doing stuff. That was my basis. I've always been working since the age of 16. And then I had a big break with Red Bull TV. I think I kind of found my footing in my place because back then, 15 years ago, sports and women and selling that dream of, in Asia particularly, not overseas, it was a very different thing. I mean, now you see people, everybody wants to be hardcore and extreme. Everyone's doing yoga, everyone's doing MMA, and you know what I mean? But back then, there just wasn't. Extreme sport, I tried to sell the dream. That was probably my first thing that I tried to sell about myself. Didn't really work out. People weren't convinced. And then anyway, I mean, from there, the Red Bull TV, I got a cut. I did sports hosting. Then it kind of bled into things, luxury, lifestyle. And then when I did motorsport, it was automotive and motorsport. And that's where the strategy came in for me to kind of swing another way to maybe make that part of my career. And that took me a while to get there.
Yeah, because I was thinking as well, out of everything, I think this is something that I personally, I'm quite curious about your personality, who, this is your career, right? For us, I think like for Sean and I, we can hide behind the camera, we can hide behind all the admin work. But for personalities who are in front of camera, you have to make a conscious choice about how much of the work that you do is sort of planned, like I am going in this direction, I want to go in this direction.
To be honest, it has been in the last decade. I mean, I would say over the last 20 years of being in this industry. The first 10 years was a period of time I was very lost. I didn't know. A lot of self-doubt, a lot of low confidence. I got into it and I tried to get an agency, but it was a very unhappy time in my life. I thought I was on the rise in 2008, 2009. I actually had a lot of personal contacts. I got involved in an agency thinking they would give me more jobs, more exposure. It was the worst time of my life. I was so broke for 2 years. It was the worst. It did nothing for my confidence. And for somebody who didn't have an education, who didn't have training, I was kind of thrown into it. Singapore's like that. It's very fast paced. You do things, you get into it. You will always get more opportunities. That's the great thing about Singapore. There's 1 degree of separation. People will just throw you jobs and either you do it, you make it, or you don't, and on to the next. And I never realized really this was a process for me. And so that was the first 10 years of my life. I moved away, had a relationship that broke down, decided to come back to Singapore in very short, and decided, nope, I've been irrelevant for 2 or 3 years. How do I get back into this? I had some guidance. I met my husband, who was into business already and doing stuff as a friend. And I had a couple of people kind of gave me my job. And then I decided, I don't know. I was at the lowest point of my life at the age of 30. And then I just kind of thought, F it. What have I got to lose? I really have nothing. It's a clean slate. And I then started to rebuild my new persona. So then I said, look, the basis that has always been me has been my sport. I didn't know anything about motorsport. I was never exposed to it. I really knew nothing, but I'm a competitive person. So that was really the drive of me getting into a new sport. And when I got my first job to host the karting championship, the local leagues over here, it was important to be able to know what I was talking about, know the characters. And that's where I really developed that skill set. And that was not strategic. It was something back then, my husband, then friend, was like, well, you need to know how to talk about karting. If not, it's not going to be exciting. You're just going to be saying names and there's no emotion, there's no connection. So I did some local leagues in short, and then won some, then got involved in a different way into motorsport. And then strategically, to be honest, some people kind of said to me, well, that's weird. When I said, well, maybe I can do sport and motorsport. Sport was coming to be a big thing for in back then, that whole yoga thing and branding and marketing and a lifestyle. It was huge 10 years ago. It was starting to pick up. Yeah, from there, it just, I kind of stuck to the idea. I kind of cut out the white noise, which is very hard. But I think because I had nothing to lose. And don't forget, throughout this last 20 years, I am just like another Eurasian in like a wave of Eurasian girls. What have I got to offer? I mean, in a wave of entertainment, Eurasian girls who are taller, who are prettier, who have more experience. I mean, that's the entertainment world, who are funnier. I'm not a funny person. So, I mean, that's just not my unique selling point. How do I make it? I was constantly told I was speaking too fast. You need to look a certain way, you need to do this. And I found it hard. Because I also didn't have that passion to want to be famous. In my heart, I wanted it to be organic and, it's accidental. But I realized a lot during the way that it's very much just like a marriage relationship. There's lust, there's enticement into the industry. That's when you kind of think you have passion for it, like a person. But then once you've done the groundwork and you think, I want to stay in this, then you've got to really work on that foundation, do the groundwork, and then exploit. I say exploit because I think that's the easiest word to for people to understand it. Use those opportunities to find new ones. And then just like the concept of marriage, you then have to work really hard to just keep it going. Yeah.
I thought it's quite interesting that you said that your first 10 years of your life was low. You had low confidence,
It was
and
awful. It was
and
awful.
yet and then somehow you found yourself on Deal or No Deal, and just standing for there for the whole episode, just smiling, holding that briefcase. How did you get on that show actually, and what was it like?
I mean, it's weird because people was like, "Oh, you're a model," and I was like, "Well, I'm not really a model." You know what I mean? I was never confident. I never really liked the term modeling because I just wasn't your typical model. I had a lot of confidence issues. I did commercials. I wasn't a stand-up, kind of person. But I thought, hey, it was easy money. 2 weeks of filming, standing there. For me, it was about making money.
It was
And
only 2 weeks.
it was 2 weeks of filming, yeah, for each
What?
one. But every day,
Oh,
every
okay.
day for those 2 weeks. And to me, it was more about making money. And I was like, it's easy. I don't really have to get involved with the girls there. I'll go there, I'll do my job, stand there, look pretty, interact. Maybe I'll make a friend, maybe I won't. For me, it was about making money because, like I said, from the age of 16, my parents had always instilled in me, make your own money. I didn't get pocket money. I came from a middle income family. So it was about supporting myself and having my own money.
You were 16 when you were on that show?
No. I was already in my 20s, I think then,
right.
24, 25. But from the age of 16, I've always just been doing work. So the commercial work, I was very lucky that I was able to earn a significant amount of money at that age. And to me, that was just, I was waitering and then when I got into the commercials, then I was doing commercials and jobs like that.
Just imagining you're standing there and hoping that they pick you first so you get to go back and sit down. then stand there for the rest of the episode. Like, pick me.
True. It's very true. But I think it was exciting for all of us. I think there was a lot of opportunities that people had. I don't think I really had any specific thought, like, I have made it. This is it. This is my opportunity. I remember thinking, I'm in the middle. I'm near this girl. I'm near this girl. Maybe we're the group of that clique who's like, maybe they think we have some star thing. I remember stressing over smart things to say when I opened the box. You know what I mean? Like that was the height of the moment then, thinking about something witty or cool or something they remember me for. It was also a period of time where people were using, other names. They were changing their names. In the industry, some people who don't use real names. Yeah, it was a thing. Because blogs were big back then, don't forget.
Yeah, that's right.
Throughout my poly years, which also got me into a lot of trouble and lost me a lot of jobs.
Oh.
And also caused me a lot of pain. It was such a weird time, when blogging was big. Yeah, those bloggers who are still around now, but probably don't do it as much. I remember doing my own page. I used to do all the HTML myself, but I think I was more into setting up. My dad is a computer nerd, so I've always had a computer my whole life. I've always been a gamer. I've always loved fiddling around. My computer room was in this little storage room. And I just sit there doing HTML for hours trying to figure out the font and figuring out how to change the color on a web page. That was my life in poly.
Oh my goodness, those were the days when you actually how do I put music on that page? And then, yeah.
And then finding out gossip. My cousin from the States was like, somebody spoke about you in school, like gossip about me in the school. I was in classic poly and going like, ooh, people talking about me. That's horrible. But is it?
Yeah, those are the days, and the internet was sort of just like rising, and then kids started to get into it. Yeah.
Famous for doing nothing.
Yeah.
That's what it was. To be honest, the barriers of entry are ridiculously high, and that's why you don't see women in it. You don't see women in it. You don't see the interest in it because we're just not exposed. I was never exposed. I remember instances back in UK when I was growing up of seeing it on TV and seeing like Damon Hill and seeing British race drivers. But my family was not into that. I had the BBC on all day. That's all I remember. I always wanted to be a journalist, actually always.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In front of TV because I always had the BBC on. War-torn journalist, it's somewhere out in Iraq. That's all I saw because that was the thing back then. But anyway, how I got into it. To be honest, it's like what I said. I moved back to Singapore. And it wasn't something that I always wanted to do. Some people, this is an anticlimax, but to me, I was living life. I was just I like sport, so I think you can throw me into any sport. And if I wanted to do it, I would take it all the way. So the real crux of it was that I need to learn how to walk the walk, talk the talk because of commentating and to make it authentic. So I joined the leagues, like I said, won some. And then when I started dating my husband, he was like, well, maybe you've got an opportunity. I have the IP. I know how to raise funds. I know how to raise money, which is completely something I had no idea. I didn't come from a background where my parents taught me how to pay my bills. They would tell me, you need to pay your pager bills or your, back then. And you need to, blah, 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 things, growing pains. But they didn't teach me how to do it. They're just busy working, surviving. And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone. My husband came from a very different background. At the age of 23 or 24, he had already, when he moved to Singapore, did army because he moved here for army. He had mentors. He was part of car clubs because he was fortunate enough to be able to own a car. And he kind of passed some of that knowledge on to me and tried to teach me. Some of it was very tumultuous. It's very difficult when you're teaching partners. We all know this.
Yeah.
We generally now separate things like that. But he taught me how to raise money. He helped me along the way how to really, he said, you really are kind of marketing yourself, but here is a different way business-wise to approach to ask for money, which was a horrific thing for me. That was probably something which was the hardest. I mean, being thick-skinned, for him, his racing costs a lot of money, but to go, hey, can I have 100K, 200K? I used to shrink and hide when I'd hear him at meetings, just ask for money. I used to just want to disappear into a shell and go, oh my God,
How can you do that?
Yeah. Like, oh, if you've got 200K laying around, we've got a marketing plan, let's do this. I've never seen that in my life. It was really, really interesting, but also scary. And of course, the first time raising money, because I was in the media, made it perhaps I can say a little bit easier. He already had that contact for the racing teams. We found a racing team, a reputable guy in Malaysia who knew all about touring production. The rest of it, though, the 70% of it, maybe up to 80% of doing the business side, raising the funds, that's super important. And that's hard. And I can tell you, as a side note to this, as an athlete in Singapore, you're not taught that. I am really grateful and very lucky that I had my husband who was taught, who was self-taught over a decade of learning to raise funds, doing sponsorship, going out there and doing a marketing plan. This is self-taught. But the rest of the athletes out there, I would have never known how to do that unless somebody kind of drilled it into me. I had mentors and other peers. Yeah, so we did that. And then, of course, then the other 20, 30% is really actually having to go and do the race and the stuff like that. And it was extremely hard at the beginning, obviously. But I just went out there and stuck my guns and just learned how to be a team player, which is probably the hardest in this kind of sport because it's racing and you're out there, but you have a whole team behind you. And just learning the ropes. And then eventually the next year, my husband's like, you have to go find your own money. I can't help you. You need to learn how to do it. And that's probably the scariest thing. And then for the next 4 years, I was doing that, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And all this while you're also driving yourself as the driver. So what is it like to be driving in a race? Most of us will experience it from a spectator, but you got to experience it as the driver, right? So what's that feeling like when you are in that car?
I was always a person that never really had nerves until an hour before. I think it's always systematic. It's like any sport. You train and you train and you train. I spent a ridiculous amount of time in Malaysia. I should have just moved there. We used to drive to and fro all the time. That's 350 Ks back there for 4 or 5 days a week, and then drive back and then just keep continuously doing that for, however long. You're there from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Testing's usually 3 days a week. And I think when you drive it into you, initially it was all about learning, getting experience, being on track with others. Of course, there were so many aspects when I first started driving that really, I think for the first time being out there, it was just get some experience, know what it's like to have 30 other cars on grid, and just find your footing because you don't really know what to feel or to expect. It's like going to a new job. There's so much expectation and things going on, things to look out for. And like anything really in your life, it's that 10,000 hour rule, I always say. You just got to do the time and the seat time. And then you kind of learn the 1,000 different things that might happen out on track, and that's only through experience. But yeah, I would only get really emotional just before my race. I would sit in my car, listen to my hip hop music. I listen to so much variants. It's probably stuff from the 90s and 2000s. I mean, I'm that child, I'm that kid, right? I'm still listening to it, even at my birthday. I've got Nas, I've got variants. I mean, even now, I'm listening to like trashy female hip hop. I've got like Cardi B. I've got Megan Thee Stallion. I love that female hardcore hip hop. You know what I mean? Just terrible, dirty. I might have one emotional music. I feel like I'm going to cry. And then it's done. And then you strapped in, and then you're just like, you're out there. You just got to do it. You
just got to do it, right?
You just got to do it. I mean, that's what you train for, right? You spend all that money and raised all that money for. Then, of course, the pressure is always for that moment, but then you just got to really be in that moment and not think about anything. Generally, as I've learned, you're emotionless actually as an athlete. People think driving is aggressive, it's this, it's that, but really you're emotionless. You're just going based on facts, on what you've done when you've gone for training. There isn't really a variation other than situations and factors you can't control. Your competitors, your hardware, the weather, the track conditions.
Malaysia is where you got your first podium as well. So it must be a really special place for you.
Malaysia is the closest place that I could go to. It's the only place that we have.
That's true.
As an extension, you can't do racing here. And that's also why it's very hard in Singapore. You have karting, but to really break out and make it internationally, the karters have to go to Europe if you start at a young age. For me, I mean, I didn't know that I was going to do this. I didn't even know because, the thing is, they always say you can teach anyone to drive. I can teach you. Somebody can teach you to drive and to race, but it's when you run out of talent. And to be honest, when I really got good at it, it took me to a place of 2.5 years. So that podium placement was like an alignment of stars. It just happened to be, I'm not the best driver. I wasn't the best driver. It just happened to be on that day. I knew what the grip felt like. I took a chance. I remember taking a risk going from third to second position. And I think you were telling me, everyone was screaming in the garage, don't do it, Claire. But I saw an opportunity of the car, the rear wheels, his tires going out on the last lap, and I see he couldn't keep grip, and I still felt grip. It was just an alignment really on that day. Good weather, good hardware, my mental state, my driving was good, and it aligned, and it's not always like that.
You mentioned the garage. Maybe for those who are curious and those not in the business, what kind of jobs are available in motorsports besides just the driver, of course, and those immediate party around him?
To be honest, it's amazing. And I think a lot of people, their misconception really is, I mean, it's just race driver, like you said, but there isn't. I mean, you've got physiotherapists that are very specific trainers to motorsport. Of course, you've got your marketing teams, you've got your team managers, you've got the whole ecosystem, which is behind the racing series. You've got, I mean, like you said, you've got your race directors. I mean, like Singapore GP, for instance, the head, she's been around for the last, more than a decade, for the last 14, I think, years. Jeanette Tan, she's just got promoted as well. She's works in the FIA Women in Motorsport for Singapore and represent as well worldwide. She heads up director role, oversees the whole series. I think she does F3 now, and that's back in Europe. But you have all that team that supports all these race series. It's like any kind of like sporting event. You got the organizers, you got the logistics. I think not just talking as a female gender, but it's an ecosystem. It's massive. There are so many jobs out there. It's the best person for the job.
I'm also very curious because from what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, right? What I see of you, at least as a personality, of course, I am motorsports. You also have a business. You work together with your husband, who also brought you into this whole the scene, right? It seems like everything you do is tied in, from your personal life to your work to your drive and your passion. How do you do that? Do you actually like that, or do you try to separate it? Like, I'm home, I'm only going to spend time with my kids, no shop talk. How does that work for you?
I'm a person very much a chameleon that really wants to diversify, but I want to not dilute. I think that's important. I don't want to do too many things that dilute my strengths. And there's things that I think weakness wise that I want to work on. Definitely as I've gone older, I think over the last decade, I have had moments where I think like, do I want to step away from it? Do I want to do this? I mean, I think the real basis I have to go back to is that when I started motorsport and I got involved, it gave structure to my life. It gave me bumper stickers on how to lead life. I was a very unstructured person in that way because I didn't really know where I was going, what I was doing. So I think I've kind of taken that as a religion and a basis of 10 commandments for myself. You know what I mean? You got to go slow to go faster. You know, just things like this. Just taglines that you can't control factors other than yourself on that day for competitions and stuff. So for me, I think I really deep down really enjoyed it. And I'm very grateful for that structure that it's given to me. It's interesting. I think we've come to a point in our relationship where, I mean, I have my own career and he has his own career. I think we're very independent personalities. We understand that we work as an ecosystem, but we also work very well. And we know what each other's strengths are and weaknesses. And we define that very early in our relationship. You're good at this and I'm good at that. Let's stick to that. Let's work on that. The other areas we can work and help each other. My area was media. His area was fundraising. We've then swapped notes. We've learned really, I think the biggest thing to take feedback from each other. And that's just any relationship. Not being able to say things that are hurtful or for the sake of saying that, not to be subjective, be objective. I think that was probably the biggest thing that I've learned out of the motorsport. Everything is objective. There's no such thing as subjective in motorsport. It's all data, it's all facts, it's all figures. That's the truth. And I think that's what makes you a truthful person, because you will only want to know the truth, no matter how bad it is. It's a reality check. So I think that's been very important. Most of the time, we have to schedule in when we're going to see each other, what we're doing, who's picking up the kid. You just, daily living. It's, I think, got to a point where we're quite fluid right now. If I need support from him for certain things, he needs support from me. We have a very good, strong relationship. And I think because people always say, how can you work to each other? That's so annoying. You're always around, or you're always with each other. And I think I like leading my life that way. And it has helped all areas of my life. And even though for the last 2-3 years, I haven't been able to get back into a car, I do, of course, my other parts of racing. That's why I have my triathlons. I have my road racing. I have my mountain bike racing. I have all these other competitions because there is no other tangible way I feel to be able to practice determination, grit, doing stuff I don't want to do. I constantly wake up, I'm like, ugh, I really don't feel like doing this today. I don't feel like doing admin. I don't know, banking. I don't feel like doing that. But there's no, don't get me wrong. I love the days where I sit in front of the TV and I've got an hour and watch trashy TV. Love it. I watch some of the worst TV ever just to zone out.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, are you training grit sitting there for 30 hours of TV? Not really. There's no tangible way. So for me, sport and having these kind of competitive things in my life teaches me that. And that's why I love the motorsport and I keep carrying it on with other competitions that I do, other sport. I think teamwork is super important, super, super important. And it is very hard when the lines get blurred. And I'm very verbal about communication, of saying, I need to decompress. I need to get away. I mean, even for the lead up for this Formula One, I think before that, people were like, this must be the most exciting time for you. And it was for the decade of my life. Absolutely. But I think things have slightly changed. I had a conversation with a friend that now, before I would take every single job and I would max out my time, that innate thing in me, because I keep going and I love hitting the ground, running, sprinting. That's just me. I love that adrenaline, that high. But even now I'm like, well, what do I want? The anxiety of figuring logistics, where I've got to be, how I want to do this, the stress of just expectations of what people want. I kind of feel like, yeah, I've drawn the line this time. And I think this has come with age, knowing what triggers me for things. Like I definitely have anxiety over certain things that I can't even say that why I'm anxious. It's just a feeling. I'm not a person who gets too deep into it. I just know that I'm like, and I get physical triggers. And I know that I need to step back. So now I focus on small things. So there's Grand Prix on things, on passion projects, connecting people and working with the youth, because I feel that has a little bit more enjoyment and less pressure. And I don't mind running towards that and introducing the girls to somebody who could be a role model for them. Or, yeah, so step back just a little bit and learn how to say no more. And like, it's okay. I don't need to do that. Yeah.
On the note of your project, there's this go-karting circuit that you operate, right?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that.
Yeah.
So that was a passion project in 2015. I mean, we had the Changi go-kart track that unfortunately after a year, that had to be let go because the government wanted that land back. And that was hugely successful. We were doing like a proper motorsport. It was in the thick of things back then in 2013. And then 2014, we mulled around with the idea and thought, well, maybe we'll do a new one since the government took the land back. And we thought, we'd had so much troubles around trying to bring karting to the masses because we wanted it to be an extension. It was an extension of our personality. And I mean, unfortunately, it's seen as an elitist sport, as they love to say this word, elitist sport. But really, it means it's just a high barrier of entry. It's just not, and you need money to be a part of it. I mean, there's no easier way than to say that. You need to have finances to be in karting. A rich parents, I don't know what you want to call it. A manager at 10 years old to find you money, I don't know.
To me, go-karting was like, before you even think of that, you just go for fun, You're just
Correct.
going around the circuit for...
So that was our concept. We decided, forget doing the hardcore stuff. If we realized we were attacking all the wrong avenues or trying to get ministers and schools and schools here is too dangerous and blah, blah, blah. So we decided, hey, you know what? We keep pushing in the wrong direction. Why don't we sell fun? So that became our objective. Let's sell fun and go by the masses. Somebody who's 9 years old, somebody who's 70 years old can have the same experience and walk away from it and then understand what it's really about instead of trying to push it through schools. We just kind of changed our objective and the way we saw it. And we decided, we don't need to be hardcore about it. Let's just sell fun. And we did that for 5 years. And then we just wanted to do another project. I think we love having lots of business projects. And then somebody came around, wanted to buy it, and we're like, sure, go ahead. And that was that. Yeah, we just wanted to do something else. It's been 5 years of doing that project.
So what else are you up to nowadays then, after that go-karting thing,
Well, I mean, we've always had this company, the Film Dispensary, and that originally that was something that was helping our careers. So the thing about sport marketing, when you're doing it yourself, it's a very tricky industry. There's a lot of people who think they can be your sport manager, that they can raise funds for you, but it's also because there's a lot of misconception. So raising is not easy, funds and sponsorship. A lot of people think that it's maybe just networking, and yes, part of it, but also it's just going out there, cold stone, knocking on doors. To be honest, I think the misconception, especially around motorsport, and I think most sport, is that they think that it has to be a tire sponsor, an oil sponsor. It just very basic understanding. Whereas, and if you go and see American marketing, I think the easiest way to talk about it, like NASCAR, they sell everything. If you go and look at NASCAR, they sell the floor, they sell the pole, they would sell any space that's available. You see it everywhere. You know what I mean? Sell your soul, maybe, I don't know, but there's branding everywhere, and it has nothing to do, with motorsport. There's been like porn websites on cars, pet food. I've always said if I had like Tampax all over my cars, I'd do it. If they had the money, whatever, man. And I think, yeah, when people try to help us and go like, oh, we've got potential leads, I'd like to be a manager, I'll get a cut from that. But it's never resulted in anything, because I think the way they were going about it and who they were asking. And I think also the marketing plan around that. So essentially our business, the Film Dispensary, started off because we had a better understanding of how to raise funds. We realized we always needed a marketing team with us. So having a good product, having good visuals, and to be honest, sponsorships is decks. It's just putting out decks, how to convince people, going out for meetings. You knock on 50 doors, you might only get 2 back. And that's the nature of the business. And that's what the business was. Of course, then it supported when we had the karting place. And then after that, we flipped the company and we said, let's do something different. What's the new thing? We're like robotics, we're like, wireless technology. So we went to robotics for a year and a half. And we chose that because it's very similar to motorsport, talking about technology, electric, because our karts were electric back then. So our concept, our understanding, battery power, battery life. And then, of course, then it was a little bit of a steep curve. learning curve. But I mean, essentially it was the same. And it's marketing. It's about making it sexy, about making robotics sexy. And we did that for a year and a half on contract with a company. So I mean, I think even as a company, we're constantly evolving. We're constantly doing new things and trying new things out. That's our other business that we do.
So you talk a lot about sponsorship, marketing, a lot of funds, and how motorsport's expensive and so on. My mind's just blown as to how you went in there and you start asking for hundreds of Ks at a time.
Maybe that's what the filmmakers should be doing right now as well.
Yeah, 200K. So, how has all of this like shaped your psychology towards money?
To be honest, I think the biggest fear out of me is that, not biggest fear, the biggest thing in my change of mindset is when I was younger, I used to think when people got something, it was this very naive thinking. And I realize that now because I know and I'm empowered with the knowledge that these people asked for things and they got it. I was like, they must be pushy. They must have been sleeping with the boss. They must have been, you know what I mean? I used to think all these like things like, or maybe it was parents or they set them up. I think the basic fact is if you don't ask for something, you will never get it. If you don't put the dollar in, you'll never win the lottery. I think that's been probably the biggest, most basic thing that I could tell. If I could tell a younger me is you've got to ask for it. And no, these people were not pushy. They just had an objective. They had a goal. And if they got it, you know what I mean? Maybe because someone believed in it, whatever reason, who cares? You know what I mean? There's a million one reasons why maybe somebody got something if they asked for it. But that's probably the biggest thinking. My mindset really was more of a very immature way of thinking. But that's also because I never had any training. I didn't have any mentors who told me anything on how to do it. So I had that terrible thought process. But I think once I got more involved, and even for me learning how to set up a business from scratch, and learning along the way, dealing with the government. I mean, at times I just feel like that process, I feel like anything is possible. Anything is possible. And I'm going to come back to a bumper sticker. It's the race is never finished until that last turn. You never say never that somebody's losing. Like it can be the last lap. People's like, well, that's it. He's never going to win. And then suddenly that person crashes out. It always it happens all the time. In any sport, you think you've won, and then this person behind you. You just never give up. And I think the most important thing that I've learned, even through this relationship and things that we talk about at home, is never to let it. Like if somebody says no to you, you just find another avenue. There are always another avenue. You know what I mean? And I think the easiest thing is people always going like, oh, you're not going to be able to do that. No, they don't allow that. And that's the problem because it's been set in your mind. It's been set in your mind because other people may have tried certain ways, and it's hearsay and blah, blah, blah. But you really got to keep pushing and doing that. And I think you've got to go under, over, around. And I think that's been where our success is. We've just kept on trying to find different avenues to keep pushing those boundaries. Even though people have said it's not possible, you're not going to be able to do stuff. And you guys are like, I think people do always wonder, how the hell are you raising all this money? And to be honest, I mean, you really got to put yourself out there. And I think the biggest thing for me, like even this time around, my husband's racing at the Formula One Grand Prix. The number one rule, especially now we have kids, is not to spend any of your money. You can go about, if you have the finances, you have different types of racing, of course, where you want to finance yourself. And initially you can do that in the beginning, but the smartest way is to get marketing if you're a marketeer. And this time around, I think in the shortest span of time, in 2 months, we set out, both of us as a common goal, because I knew, even for my husband, we're a team, that we wanted to go and fundraise before the Grand Prix because the news came out so late that there was seats available at the support race for this. And for the 2 months, we just went knocking, advertising, marketing, looking down every avenue for him to raise those funds for him to go and do that race at the Formula One. That's the best thing that we do, that we know how to do. And we did that, and he's going to be racing, especially in this economy, where people are not sure with budgets, where's this going? Yeah.
On the note of sponsorships and marketing, that's possible on the Uncool podcast. Just drop us an email at contact@creativesatwork.asia to find out more about these opportunities.
On the note of economy, I think well we know the I word is very big, right? Inflation and so on, and everything gets more or less gone up like 20% or something. Like if you go down and buy milk at the supermarket, it's like it may just be 60 cents increase, but that's still 10%. So is this gonna impact you guys as well in motorsport? Like everything's going up 10-20%, and that consequently would affect the way you run your business.
I mean, I think inflation's always going to affect your business in some way, even with talent. I mean, there's this whole issue with employment, with things like that, with expectations of market rates, market prices, inflation. I mean, it's a tricky game, but I mean, I think essentially we know companies out there have money. I think that's the most important thing. When people say the economy, people not it hasn't stopped people from buying expensive cars. It hasn't stopped people from paying the taxes and paying 100 grand, 110 grand, COE. Hasn't stopped them. People are still paying. And the fact is, because when you see these advertisements out there for the cars, for the manufacturers, for things that you do, they're spending a lot of money on this. You know what I mean? Yes, there's inflation. To answer your question, does it affect? I think minimally. Just got to raise more money then. And that's what I would say. You just got to raise more money.
How does that change your psyche, Claire?
I think that's just personality. It's been driven into me as my Asian mother. You have to have money for yourself. And I think I've tried to really let go of some things, going like, it's okay. You know what I mean? That whole relationship with money. I still have very much that basis of old school thinking, only spend what you've got. I mean, as a relationship, as a couple, we have that. We've got kids now, so it's very important to us to want to make sure that we plan for our lives that way, safeguarding, making investments, setting things out in our household, things that we can enjoy, things that we don't need. Yeah, and I think obviously, I mean, it comes down, of course, to certain things like passion. And I know now, of course, being in social media, being a host, being a presenter, I have a rough calculation in my head when of when I go into sets. They're paying for me as a talent, what they've rented out and stuff. There's money there. There's money to be made. And we know that people have money. They always have money for advertising, for marketing. It's just how they see your worth, how you've placed your worth, how you found that value, and what they see out of you. Have you sold a good enough story for them to spend the money and getting the name out there? And how do you maybe perhaps convince them to want to sell their story? How to convince them, to take that chance out on them. I think it really comes down to that. But I mean, coming back to your question on the relationship with money? How has my psychology of money? I mean, I've learned now that as long as you're hardworking, I mean, in that aspect, I mean, there's variances of what hard work is. But from myself, my own personal view, there is always money to be made. I don't need to have it all. I don't need to be collecting 20 houses and having all these things, and because it also, for me, I mean, it's exponential, right? Having more things is more problems. For me, that's how a very basic kind of view in my head. I think try and keep it as simple as possible. Yes, I mean, now and again, I have nice things. I do have nice cars and stuff like that. But I also have that value that I know that I work hard. I'm just definitely that kind of person who finds it hard to stay at home. I like projects. I like meeting people. I like connecting people. I like working for people, for clients. I like being part of their projects and helping to bring their projects to life because they have confidence in me to do that. I mean, yeah, I think I'm just living life, to be honest. I'm just living life. I really don't think super hard.
About the future of marketing, which you clearly are very experienced in, where do you see all this marketing going, especially about the new technologies coming in, like, blockchains, Web 3.0, and so on? How do you see that changing marketing?
I do. I mean, to be honest, I love the concept of it. I think I've always been involved in technology, like I said, with the computers, with the web, with everything behind it. I think definitely I've always been that risk taker. So I enjoy the concept of even investing some of my portfolio into that. Even some of these things, I think there's a lot of naysay, especially with crypto crashing and whatnot and Web3. I love the concept. I love the concept of the matrix. How it pans out, I mean, I don't think it's the right time now, technology-wise. We're all still trying to find a placing, a worth, a value in it. But I think the creatives are all coming up with certain ways to make it a lot more interesting. I mean, it's also a scary place. A lot of people have lost a lot of money, but I think this is where, I mean, this is where you have to have make the smart decisions about it. I think future wise, it's only going to get more. I mean, I think it's going to be around for a long while. Going to be involved in everything. I mean, this whole payment gateways, man, just the whole world. I've got friends who are involved in just applications in work, even people in the finance industry involved in it. And I think it's an exciting time. I mean, it is the matrix for me. I definitely want to be involved in some kind of way. And yeah, and I can't wait. I think it's an exciting time.
We speak to a lot of creators here. We speak to a lot of freelancers, and a lot of them, yes, they are driven a lot by passion. Speaking to you, Claire, I hope you take this in a good light. You are very driven by necessity and survival, and of course, there's I think, like you said, it's a personality behind you as well. You're always challenging yourself, but it's also a lot of practicality that is inside whatever you do.
Yeah, I mean, if the zodiacs were real, I'm your perfect Virgo. I am critical, mostly of myself. I'm practical, and this is also because of my parents. Very practical beginning. So even, I mean, there's always the devil and the angel on my shoulders. Very much the kind of person where always have to have that savings, look after yourself. And even though I have a natural wild streak, I've managed to swivel that down on that other side to be, I have a spontaneous side. I've learned to kind of, I suppose, like quell that, douse the fires a little bit on craziness. I still have that, but I just have better decision making skills. I think that's probably the best thing. And I have very good peers around me who go, even if crazy ideas, but I suppose just more. Just better decisions.
That has come about because of, you having a family right now? Or is it just every day?
I think it's come from making a bunch of bad decisions. And that's the only way I would have known. There's no other way. There is no other way that I would have learnt it if I had not made all those crappy decisions or gone through crappy moments in my life. I would not feel as confident as I am to want to be able to lose everything.
So on that note, what's the crappiest thing you've done?
I think, oh man, I mean, soul crushing. I mean, I think there's certain incidences in your life. I mean, I've definitely been on the whim kind of person where if I had to move away for someone, I would do it. You know what I mean? And probably the most soul crushing, and it's only a few incidences really in my life that I actually look back and reflect where I've done certain jobs and they've never called me back for. I was younger. I didn't know what I was doing. I remember crying back home from a job one day for football. And I remember they'd given me a job one day. I just rocked up there to do like local leagues and I crushed it. It was live TV. What kind of live? It was shown 5 minutes before. Second time I went there, I blubbed and they never called me back. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody said, give you a second chance. They just didn't call me back. Nobody said a word. They just said, okay, cut it short, film this piece, bye. It was horrible. I had no direction. I had nobody giving me feedback. I didn't dare ask for feedback. I didn't know what to do. And I walked away from thinking, what am I doing? Should I even be a host? Should I, you know what I mean? Am I doing the right thing? That's probably, I think, pivotal moments that has really driven me. But on that, I think the rest of the times, I think there was a point in my life when I hit my 30s, I stopped looking at what's crappy and what's not crappy. I stopped defining and putting tags on them. And I just got on with it. I just looked at, I think I changed my mindset of just how, if I had crappy moments, so-called, how did I improve myself and how did I get better? How do I improve myself? I think that was, I changed my mindset. It was huge.
It's the thing about being freelance and self-employed, right? I mean, you're only as good as your last job. So what exactly you just described, I think that is exactly it, right? You great the first time and second time's like, not so great. And then it just spirals down from there if you let it.
That's why I like sport, because it's constant. It's the same. You're constantly having bad days, good days, and you're constantly having to pick yourself up and then finding, I guess, your core ethos to like, why am I carrying this on? Do I really enjoy this? What am I going to do? Yeah.
I think that's a huge change that a lot of people, once it starts, I think for myself as well, why it resonates is because I also started to realize that, right? You've done things like, yes, okay, but doesn't mean you're crap, right? It is just a learning journey. You are still progressing. It's still the next day and you still have to improve. You can't just sit there in that crappiness and like, I'm crap. So that's all I'm going to be amount to. Right. So I don't know whether it comes with age or it comes with just having to pick yourself up, Claire, like you just said. You did it and then you just have to go on and find a new way to help yourself further along that journey, right?
There's full of like lemons thrown at you, and I mean, and my parents went through a lot of it, and I don't say they're bitter at some things, but there's a lot of things that they just carry on with. They were just hard because they had to. I think we will have a survival mode. And for me right now, my relationship with money, relationship with whatever I do, there's always a core survival mode. I think that comes to the basis of that. And I think it's important just for my mental health and stuff. I enjoy working. I think it's important for my relationship, important for my kids, I think, to be a role model. And that's what I want them to see. And I think not so much about myself now. It's really what I want to represent now that I have a family, what I want them to see. And I think if I don't do these things, it's very hard for me to pass this on and talk about it to somebody else if I'm not doing it. Pretty much like that. And I think, I guess my last piece really is that failure will exponentially lead you to your form of what you see as success. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned.
So what's next for you? What's coming up? I see that you're preparing for, is it a triathlon or is it just a cycling race?
I have lots of things. I mean, I think the season for triathlons, usually that's the beginning of the year or mid-year. I always do the triathlon series. I do a lot of road bike and mountain bike. So I join usually the national championships, usually very last minute, over here for mountain bike and for road racing. I just did my first time trial race, which was horrible. It was terrible. First time I've ever done a team sport for cycling. A lot of pressure, a lot of self-doubt. It didn't turn out. My teammates were fantastic. My race myself was not that easy, but yeah, I've just got to keep on pushing. And it doesn't mean I'm a cyclist. I just was not great on that day. Things I did in the lead up, I've gone over it. Yeah, there's always things going out through the year. I constantly keep on training. I think that's the one thing I've taken my training quite more seriously, a lot more seriously, just scientifically. I'm doing a lot of training by data, triathlon wise. So I'm running, swimming, and cycling probably every day, of course with breaks, but on a scientific basis with the coach. And before I would train, do the competition, let off the gas, but now it's consistently. I've been doing it now for 8 months consistently, and now with a coach. So it's a lot of discipline, waking up early with the kids. But I think for a person who used to say that I hate routine and I never want to work a 9-to-5 job, routine is really important. And actually routine for a personality who used to be so wild, like a wild child myself, it's very important. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the routine.
This is a question that we ask all our guests. I know that we asked, when were you the most uncool or your lowest point in your life? So when were you the most uncool in your mind, and what would you say to yourself back then if you had the chance?
Probably when I thought, like back then when I was trying to grapple with being in the industry, like what I told you earlier on, my mindset of going, oh, that person, they've made it because they did this and this and this. I've been conditioned in some kind of way to think negatively about that person. Other than, and people go like, oh, these people are hanging out in cliques and groups and they're only hanging out with these kind of people. But actually the view was maybe they're hanging out with like-minded people who wanted the same thing, who had an objective, how to get somewhere and how they were doing it. And instead of clapping for them and going, good for you, I think in some kind of weird way I was conditioned, maybe by the people I was around, or I don't know, I can't remember pinpoint why, but conditioned to not be happy for them.
So you're a competitive streak.
It's a competitive streak, but I think there's ways to be competitive. I think competitive is one thing. It's hard to break it down in a short period of time. I think it's a very complex thing, but I think credit's due to people. And I think when they've done certain things in a certain way. And I think the uncool part about me was not really understanding them or how they did it or why they did it. And really sometimes it didn't even matter. But building them up instead of breaking them down.
Where can they find you if they want to keep up to date on your new project?
Sure. Instagram, I have a pretty open life there, at Claire Jedrek. You can see me now and again on TikTok. I might do random ones. I'm not like super into that, but I do random projects on there when I feel like it, stupid stuff. You can find me on my Facebook. Of course, I have my public and profile pages, but that's also at Claire Jedrek, or facebook.com/Claire Jedrek. You can also have the webpage. You can just type in my name, something will pop up.
Yeah, it's a very unique name. So you'll find her. So follow Claire and her life on and off the track on her socials, but also follow Freelance Creative Exchange on Spotify and wherever you listen to podcasts. Share with your friends on socials. Drop us a 5-star rating because it really does help, and we want to continue helping professional freelance creators as much as we can with the content that we do. Because remember, it's cool to be uncool.
Like this show? Then rate it 5 stars and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Uncool is a podcast by Creatives at Work. It is produced, written, and hosted by Sean Lee Chong and co-hosted by Yen Lyng, co-produced by Raven Lim, and edited by Ray Ng. Uncool. It's cool to be uncool.
On the next episode of Uncool,
when you're working in VFX, the shots start coming back just before final completion. In Mortal Kombat, there was one character called Goro. It's got 4 arms. They literally had 2 stunt guys, one on top of each other, sort of going like this. Then the grayscale comes in, and then the textures come in, and it's just when you finally get it all put together, it's really a lovely moment.
Uncool. New episodes every Saturday.